We're creating gardens full of beauty and life. We're talking pets in the garden coming up next. Over the past 20 years as a garden designer, I've enjoyed helping homeowners create private sanctuaries full of beauty and wonder. I find each garden to be a fresh opportunity to explore ways to create uniquely personal spaces. These are just a few of the gardens I've helped to transform into garden homes. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Welcome to the Garden Home. Now, this is a show about garden design and blurring the lines between inside and out. Yeah, bring it right on up here, Chris. That's great. This is my chicken palace. Not a chicken coop, not a chicken house, but a bona fide first-class accommodation for some of my little bantam chickens. You know, I love them as pets. And today's show is about having fun in the garden with pets. Today, we're going to explore this idea of pets in the garden. Did you know that over 70 million gardeners also own either a cat or a dog? Some coincidence, huh? I know that my garden wouldn't be the same without fish, dogs, cats, birds, chickens, horses, cows, toads, elephants. Oh, just kidding on that last one. Today's show is all about making our gardens safe and comfortable for our pets. And I'm going to take you to a really unique place where dogs are a king of a sport, but also find good homes after they retire. The humane side of greyhound racing coming up. But first, let me show you a project that's going on out here at the Garden Home that's bound to bring beauty and life to the property. One of the aspects of this old dairy farm that I really like are the vast open spaces. And the reason I like it so much is it's a perfect environment for one of my favorite birds, the eastern bluebird. So to make this more bluebird friendly, I decided to enlist the help of some bluebird experts.
To build a bluebird trail, we're standing in probably one of the ideal habitats. A big open pasture or meadow like this that does not have a lot of insecticides applied to it, away from the tree line, about 100 yards apart. You also want to factor in your maintenance concerns. If you're riding big mowers through here, whoever's doing the mowing needs to be aware that these boxes don't need to be disturbed a whole lot. So if you can put them in a fairly straight line, that's going to make it easier to maintain. As long as you can keep a fairly consecutive distance between the boxes. If you put your bluebird boxes too close to a tree line, you're going to have some problems with things like flying squirrels. Either southern or northern flying squirrels love to move in, call that home for them. There are other animals like raccoons that would walk along the edge of a forested tree line looking for prey animals, and they'll go in and try to remove the baby birds out of the box. So the farther out you can get from a tree line, the less predators you'll have. When we look at a bluebird box, there's some things you need to factor in. One of them is how easy it is to open and close, because you do need to maintain it and clean it throughout the year. You also want to make sure that it's on a pole, normally about 6 feet, about eye level with you, so you can easily maintain it. An 8-foot galvanized pipe would be great, because you could drive about 2 feet into the ground if the ground's not too rocky. You can put a predator guard, so if a snake or a raccoon would try to climb up the pole, that would block the predator from getting to the box. You want to have good ventilation in the box so it can drain properly. Position of the sun and wind, where the prevailing winds are coming from, you need to factor that in as far as positioning it so it's away from the really strong winds.
One of the best things to really remember when building a birdhouse is not to use treated lumber. There's chemicals in that can be harmful to the bird. One of the best types to do is a cedar house. That's going to keep insect pests out, and it's a really sturdy, strong wood. So that's really the most important thing, is to remember what type of lumber you're using. One of the most important things you're going to notice on all these boxes, there's no perch on the front. A bluebird doesn't need a perch. Other birds do, like a house sparrow. So they're going to be more likely to have pests enter your house if you use a perch on the front. The other thing to remember when building a bluebird box is the diameter of the hole that you use. And the diameter needs to be about 1.5 inches opening. That's going to discourage other animals from getting in there. It's small enough that the bluebird can get in, but it keeps other predators and things out. Another thing to keep in mind is an overhang over the opening. That's going to keep some of the rain and wind and things out and protect those nestling birds. Something you'll notice with other houses that we have up here is sometimes a woodpecker decides to move in and may try and excavate a bigger hole. To save the price of you replacing this whole board on the front of your bluebird box, you can put a reinforced lip So when the woodpecker bores that hole a little bit bigger, you can just go in and replace that extra 1/4 inch of board you have there. To make it even stronger for those woodpeckers and make it harder for them to excavate the hole, you can also put some metal flashing around the opening of the hole, which is going to keep that hole at that small diameter you need for the bluebirds to use and keep other animals out. A bluebird trail or bluebird houses can really add a component to your lifestyle around your home. Not only are bluebirds really pretty and fun to watch, they have a beautiful call that you can listen to. They're also extremely beneficial because they are insect eaters and feed their young insects and can remove a lot of those insect pests around your house.
Well, I have to tell you, I took the advice. I placed one of the bird boxes right here. So with the perfect house, the perfect pole at the perfect height, and the perfect baffle, we have 4 eggs in the box. We're in the bluebird business. I've always been a fan of feeding and housing the birds, from the simplest feeder hung outside a window or on a tree branch to ornate and whimsical houses seen in gardens coast to coast. So it was only natural for me to think about housing the birds when I started building my new garden home. Certainly attracting and caring for wild birds is going to be a big part of this place, but we're also going to have a few domestic fowl or birds up here, namely my little Bantam chickens. Over the years I've raised several different breeds, such as barred Plymouth Rocks, black Cochins, and even some mixed breeds. They've been some of my best pets. If you're not familiar with chicken varieties, a great way to get educated and entertained at the same time is at a livestock show or at your local fair or a poultry competition. Even if you're saying, look, I'd never have any chickens around, the sheer beauty of the plumage and whimsical personalities make visiting one of these events worthwhile. Now you may be asking yourself, Alan, what on earth are you going to do with this chicken palace out there? Well, the honest answer is I'm really not sure. I want to use it in the vegetable garden somewhere, perhaps as a focal point. You see, the architectural style of the house is Greek Revival, and so is this, so they're going to work well together. The other good thing about this, which gives me some flexibility, is that it is portable. You see, the top pediment comes off, so it makes it easy to move around, so I have some choices. In fact, in years past, it was housed on top of one of my raised beds in my vegetable garden. I designed it to fit over one of the beds so that the chickens could graze on end-of-the-season crops. They had a great time and were by far the best housed hens in the hood. What I'm doing now is getting this ready to stain. I'm going to color it the same color as the old dairy barn, that really dark, rich coffee brown, and I'm going to do the roof red as well. And as the finishing touch, I'll attach this gold rooster. That's one way to bring some of the drama to this simple wooden structure. Okay, let's take a look at what's going on out here on the job site. In the vegetable garden, the raised beds are in place, and we're starting our first planting of some flowers. These are just little plugs now, but you just wait. In a few months, the beds will be toppling over with cosmos, coleus, phlox, and even petunias. And large shrubs are starting to define the structure out here. We've got a garden pool started. Go get them, guys. The footings for the house are in place, and it won't be long before we start to see the garden home take shape. And the dairy barn is looking more and more like a part of the landscape. I think that black Adler stain really sets off the tin roof. Now, I know I just keep going on about this, but what a difference it makes. Okay, let's get back to animals in the garden for just a minute. As you can see, Kit and Atticus are settling into their new home quite nicely, although I have to say I think Angel's a little nervous about having such big new friends. My sister's responsible for me adopting these horses, and I'm really enjoying having them around. You're probably familiar with pet adoption through your local humane society. You know, there's some programs that are breed specific. For instance, with greyhounds.
Our retired racers from Mid-South Greyhound is affiliated with Southland Park. These are retired race dogs. We spay or neuter them, and we give them all their shots. When the greyhound is going to a home, we send them home with a collar that's been donated and a leash. We send them home with a muzzle, which they are used to wearing, which is usually a good thing to have. It's just a safety factor. They have thin skin, and when they are out in the yard, they have a tendency to play a little rough, and it doesn't take much for somebody to get a little bit of a nip. This is our adoption kennel. These are the crates that the greyhounds are used to being in when they're in the racing kennel. They come over here. It's still a kennel environment. These are sisters. This is Stock and Sugar, and I'm trying to get them in a home together because she's very, very friendly, and she's a little shy until she gets to know you. Tailgate is our biggest boy in the kennel. He looks really big, he has a lot of energy, but as you can see, he's used to staying in a small space, and they do curl up nicely. Come on, buddy. Thank you for that. Come on, big boy. Thank you. This is Chip. He's very unusual. He has part of a blue eye. He has a lot of energy. We have a lot of greyhounds that go into homes with other small animals, including small dogs. They do well with any other breed of dog. They just are a very social animal, and they love attention.
Now, if Greyhound adoption seems like a out-of-the-way sort of thing to do, you might consider this. I once visited an elephant sanctuary in the middle of the American South. Now, these are some kind of adopted pets, wouldn't you say? For more traditional pet adoption tips, just look to your local humane society.
It is so important to pick the right pet for your family. If you visit your local humane society or shelter, they'd be glad to assist you in picking out the right one for your situation. Factors that they'll consider is the size of your home, how many children you have, the ages of your children, how much activity you partake in. For instance, if you have a small home or a small garden, yard, you might want to pick a smaller animal unless you're willing to provide it with extra exercise. Most shelters and humane societies have a fee, adoption fee. This usually ranges from $175 to $200. But actually it's a really good deal because all the animals have all their shots, they've been wormed, and this also usually includes spay and neutering, so it's always a good deal. If you can't have a dog or a kitten in your life, you may think about volunteering for the Humane Society or your local shelter. We always are in need of volunteers to work with the animals, take them for walks, just interact with them to make them more adoptable and better companions for people. I would just encourage everyone to give them a chance instead of before they buy or breed their own animals, because these animals are so loving and they just need a chance.
It's a lot of fun having dogs and cats around. Some of the unexpected and humorous things they do can bring a lot of joy to life. Angel and Lucky are really enjoying the garden home out here. They're making it their home. Seeing Angel and her brother Lucky roughhousing and running across fields just fills the space with loads of energy. Of course, we want to make the garden as safe as possible, and that includes selecting plants that aren't going to cause harm to our pets. Since the garden we're creating out here is all organic, I don't have to worry about hard chemicals or pesticides harming the pets or wildlife. But there's another consideration, and that's the plants I'm choosing. I'm trying to select plants that won't be harmful to pets, like Lucky and Angel. You know, it's more about young pets, kittens and puppies, that we're concerned with. Older pets don't tend to chew on things, but you know your dog and cat better than anyone. Here are a few notes about some of the common plants that you might want to consider. For instance, the houseplant aloe may be cool for burns, but it's not for your felines, so keep this one out of their reach. And when it comes to the bird of paradise, well, this is one bird your cat should avoid. During the holidays, you may think that poinsettias are the only plant you need to keep an eye on around your children and pets, but amaryllis can be a hazard too. And foxglove, it may sound like an animal-friendly plant, but it really isn't. You see, the leaves of digitalis can be deadly. Larkspur is one wildflower that may be appealing to our eyes, but as a young plant, it bears a potential problem for any curious little critter. And morning glories are truly a beautiful flower. Just don't let your furry friends start digging and get a hold of any of the seeds or roots. They're potentially poisonous. And one more tip. You can prevent your animals from chewing on plants by misting the leaves with pepper spray. Pepper spray is also great for getting rid of some unwanted visitors to your garden, namely insects that want to make lunch out of your vegetable garden. We're in the middle of a long, hot summer, and we're a ways off to having perfect conditions for the dogs. You know, this time of year, it's so important to make sure they have a shady place. So I've made this little place in the corner of the barn here where she can get a little shade from the sun. And water is also important, so I make sure that they have plenty of cool, fresh water throughout the day. And of course, bedding. And you can see Angel is very comfortable in her new pad. Here's something you probably think about for yourself, but did you know that pets can benefit from sunscreen too? Sure, the fur helps, but light-skinned animals can actually sunburn. You see, good grooming will help your pet's coat do its job and protect from the sun and insulate from heat. Poor grooming can lead to tangles and heat buildup. During the summer heat, it's tempting for pets to drink from puddles, but beware of toxins such as antifreeze and other chemicals that could be lurking in water in areas with car traffic, such as a curb along a street. Humidity can also cause a pet to overheat. You see, when we sweat, our body is cooling itself down, but animals only perspire around their paws, which is not enough to cool the body. Panting is how pets rid themselves of excess heat. Now, Lucky and Angel love to play around, and while exercise is an important part of their daily activity, overdoing it can cause them to overheat. Now, as I mentioned earlier, make sure your pet has plenty of water, and if you notice excessive panting or exhaustion, it's time to stop the play and get in the shade. Of course, in the winter, it's equally important that your pets remain hydrated, so make sure that there's water that doesn't freeze. When it comes to bedding, I found that wheat straw makes comfortable bedding, and it's also a great insulator. Of course, I'm all about bringing the garden inside, but it's also important to make an environment outdoors in the garden for your pets. You know, when I was a kid, we had all kinds of pets. It was a complete menagerie. And I remember the first time we got a baby goat, my dad brought it home as a surprise. Well, we were surprised, but our dogs were as well. That goat became their best friend. And I have to say, she was so mischievous, always into everything. Now, maybe not the best pet if you're really into flowers, but for us, we loved having her around as kids. One of the aspects of garden design that really turns me on is this idea of making pictures, and that's really what we're doing in the landscape. We're painting not with paint, but we're painting with plants and other elements. So why don't we take some ideas and paint a picture on Pamela's house in New Jersey. Now, what I like about this is it's a vintage house. Looks like it's probably from the 1870s, and it's very straightforward and classic. Now, I like the fact that she has this hedge that runs across the front, and from what I can tell from this photograph, it looks like a forsythia. You know, forsythia blooms so beautifully in the spring with that bright yellow flower. Now, by having this hedge across the front, it offers a little privacy. It looks like this is the busier street across the front. So I think the fact that she has this entry on the side is much better than coming up across the front of the house like this. So that's very good. Now, some things I'd like to change include this arrangement of hedge. They've grown up over the windows, and I'd like to see these scallop down so you can see some of the window. Could actually create a nice pattern along there if you did scallop under each of the windows. You can see you've got a rhythm established with these three windows. Now let's take a look at the lamp post here. It seems like the lamp is really undersized for the size of this house. It's really quite a large house, so I think a larger lantern here would be better. Now let's talk about some hardscape improvements. We talked about painting with plants and other things. Well, the hardscape such as fences and so forth can really add to a property. Get this erased. I'm thinking along the side, since this is the main entry to the house, what I'd like to see is maybe a classic post here with a fence. Perhaps the fence scallops, comes across to the entry here, and the fence goes all the way to the back. Now, if you look at the back of Pamela's house, you can see she's added on a sunroom, and this fence would carry out all the way across the back to the back property. And what's nice about the front of this house is you get these borrowed views. Looks like a beautiful courthouse in the distance. You know, that's the nice thing about living in a historic neighborhood, is that often the buildings around you really have a lot of architectural integrity and interest. This reminds me of a trip I made to Charleston recently, where I was in a garden where you could see church spires from that particular backyard. Now let's get back to the fence. You see, I'd carry it all the way back to the property line, and I would leave a break that would carry a path over to the deck and the new sunroom. But let's focus here. This would be a picket fence that would run across the front, or the side I should say here. Maybe it has a baseboard along the bottom like that. A scalloped picket fence here, one across there. And I'm thinking that even here you could do a wonderful arbor that could be covered with an old-fashioned rose. In my own garden, on the side yard, just as you see here, I have an arbor and I have it covered with a New Dawn rose. Now that arbor could take lots of different forms. Just a basic, simple pediment like that could work. And then the path itself, I think I would bring some flagstone right up to the edge of the asphalt here, the paving, and carry a flagstone, stepping stone path all the way across the front to the front door there. Now let's talk about some green additions. To frame up the house, I think over here I would plant something evergreen, like a holly or hemlock hedge on this side of the house. Doesn't look like she has much space from the house over to this hedge, but here on this corner I think it would be really wonderful to plant a small flowering shrub like a lilac here, which would bloom in the spring shortly after the forsythia, have a beautiful lavender colored bloom. And then I think over here we have another opportunity for a small tree. Perhaps this could be a miniature crabapple, which would flower a little later in the spring and provide beautiful golden leaves in the fall and lots of fruit for the birds in the winter. Now, if you know me, you know I love old-fashioned roses. So once you have this fence in place, there's an opportunity to add some old-fashioned roses on this picket fence. And what you might even think about is picking a rose that dates back to the date of the house. So if the house is from the 1870s, you can pick one of those wonderful old-fashioned roses that were introduced about that time. You can even bring the roses all the way along that property, which would be fantastic. Well, there you go, Pamela. Just a few ideas to consider that would help finish out this picture. It's a beautiful house, and I think the garden can be just as attractive. Now, a little earlier in the show, I mentioned my passion for poultry and having little bantam chickens around. I think they're a lot of fun. You know, I guess for the modern gardener, having chickens around is sort of an indulgence. When you think about having chickens in suburbia, well, it doesn't work out always, but they really are quite comical. One of the advantages is the manure is great in compost, and I'm always adding it into my garden. Now, if you don't have chickens, you can go to a pelletized form of chicken manure. Another good source of fertilizer for the garden is cow manure. But before you go out to your local farmer and purchase a load of this stuff, there are a few things you should know. First, the manure should be well rotted, well decomposed, and the other is that you should probably expect lots of weeds to come up. So be prepared to use a pre-emergent herbicide. Now, an organic approach to this would be to use corn gluten and spread it over the bed, and this will keep weed seed from germinating. Now, when I can, in my compost bin, I like to layer brown and green materials. The green can take the form of spent plants or grass clippings. And the brown, well, the best example is all these fall leaves. This combination accelerates the decomposition process. The nitrogen in the greens help break down the carbon-rich leaves. Now, another good source of nitrogen is, as I mentioned earlier, animal manure. And I say use it any time because it gives my compost bin a real kick. It will keep on cooking right through the fall and winter. Any kind of manure will work. Horse, cow, sheep, or chicken. Now I'm going to say it one more time. Whenever you use manure in your compost bin, you want to make sure that it's well rotted and aged. You see, fresh manure taken directly from the barnyard can contain some dangerous E. coli bacteria that can be found in undercooked beef, for instance. That's why I like to get it aged and put it in my compost and let it heat up so it reduces the chance of getting any on my vegetables, especially those that I might eat raw, like lettuce. Now, if you're planning on using compost with manure in it for your lawn or ornamental flower beds, you obviously don't have to worry about the bacteria. Well, that's all the time we have for today's show. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. We learned about how to make our gardens safe and comfortable for pets. What I'd like for you to do is get out there and adopt a pet. And if you already have one, go get another one. Until next time, from the Garden Home, I'm Alan Smith.